Ex-cons of Reddit, what's the worst thing that happened to you whilst doing your time? Serious. I suppose seeing people getting taken advantage of all of the time and then not caring was the worst. New guys coming in and getting ripped off on trades and stuff. People with social/developmental issues just getting their food taken from them. Also, the psychology of people without goals gets weird. What was worst was just becoming part of that world. There are so many people there that have their rights taken away from them on a regular basis and don't care anymore. They choose to place value on being able to make others fear them. They stop thinking about the world beyond the walls and just get all wrapped up in the weird culture of the place. There was a day I was feeling proud of myself because I was running around organizing contraband trades, setting up poker games, and owning things like hardcover books and the only dice in the place. In that moment of pride I realized I had started to lose my mind. It's honestly hard to remember the months in there because most of the time nothing's faking happening. Nothing. You've read until you can't stand it. You've slept all you can. You can't play cards cause your cellie is sleeping, so you stare at the ceiling and wait. It's so weird to realize you're doing the equivalent of time out for months. You're not waiting for 5 minutes. Not waiting 5 hours. You're waiting for a day that is months away. Just waiting. TLDR, it's like being in a DMV with a bunch of assholes and your number isn't up until next January. Edit. Missed an S in there and restructured a couple sentences for clarity. Edit 2. You/Thekau reminded me of the other thing that was awful on the human psyche. You're not really a person in there. You might have people that care about you on the outside, but they are still living their lives. The guys you play cards with are only trying to pass time, just like you. The officers don't care. You're just another pain in their ass. You just wear the same linen pajamas every day and just exist. This isn't something that happened to me, but it's something I observed while in. My life was uneventful in my time, which was only about 4 months, and only during nights, because I had multiple releases anyway. Our jail was divided into sides and floors. The higher up you were, the worse of an offender you were. 1L was the floor with the men with releases or protective custody. 1R was women. Up through 5R and L, which were serious violent offenders. 1L was 12 individual cells. 5 x 8 feet, surrounded by a larger cage, 1 TV in the dead middle. Our floor got the new arrivals who mostly, myself included for the first 2 months, had to sleep on rubber mats on the floor. One day a young black man whom I knew from childhood was moved onto our floor. He'd been in the system since about 12. He had finally been granted work release. The guards hated him. All the guards were white. They didn't pull any punches. This was the year 2000. He was about 19 at this time. The night they moved him in was uneventful. The next morning, his release was for 6 AM, to be at work at a restaurant at 6:30. The overpass guard was an asshole who loved doing things like dropping our food, or releasing us late, or holding us for an extra inspection, or whatever. That morning, he was too busy to let this inmate out until 9 AM. Our only phone was collect, and he did, for whatever reason, turn it off that morning so none of us could use it. Kid finally gets out, his ride still waiting, and beats feet to work. They actually let him work till noon, at which point he came immediately back, like he was supposed to, during which time they made him sit in the sally port for about 5 hours w/o food, water, or bathroom. So he gets in, after dinner, and goes back to his cell, pretty dejected but not being bad or disrespectful. The next morning, they do the same thing. He gets to work, and the manager can't do much but fire him, so he comes straight back to work, and calls his PO on the way, and she calls the jail, to tell them that he won't need his release the next day. So he comes back on the floor, and pretty much immediately gets on the phone his lawyer and family trying to find a new job. Cue the big fat guard beach. She comes walking down the floor, outside the second cage, laughing, saying something like "How was work X?" To which he responds, "You know how it was." And she, and I swear to God she said this, says something like "Shoulda known a lazy nigga wouldn't get to work on time. Looks like you're going back upstairs with the rest of the monkeys." We're all kind of appalled that she'd say that, and we're all white dudes, so he says something like, "Don't you have anything better to do?" Which was of course what she was hoping for. Lockdown, she says loudly, which is where we all go back to our cages or mats. We all abide. She gets on her walkie and says her clothes first left and locks us all in 3 hours before normal time. He says something like, you ain't gotta take it out on all these dudes. They didn't do nothing. And she says, shut up and mate. On your knees. Now, you have to remember that she's 6 feet in front of him and none of us can see because we're all in our cages. Only the cage next to him can see her really because he's in the last cell. So she starts screaming at him, calling him names, making fun of him, nasty stuff. So, he calls her a beach or something. She pulls out her can of faking bear spray, giant pepper spray can, and just hoses him down, and the rest of us, by proximity. Then she calls in the response team, which is just one dude and his dog, and they haul the kid out, not fighting, in cuffs and drag him away, leaving the rest of us to wheeze on pepper spray for the rest of the night. That was one story. I can tell you about the guy with the wheelchair, or the littering guy, or lots of stuff. Point edit. Thanks everyone for your comments. I didn't expect this to get this big. I feel like I've had a pretty wild life and I love talking about the crazy things I've done. 8x felon Eagle Scout EMT with SAR dogs. Okay. I've worked in youth residential group homes, worked as a counselor, taught public school, had to restrain lots of folks, been stabbed by students, been deposed for very technical ladder related issues in big lawsuits, seen some crazy abuse, and I'm happy to share about all of it, because I think our stories should all be shared. For the record, I was originally charged with 28 felonies and something like 15 misdemeanors for B&E. Effectively, the DA took every single unsolved B&E from the previous year and charged me with it. We couldn't afford the $10K my lawyer wanted to go to trial. That was after the $10K he charged just to represent me. So we took a plea bargain of 8 felonies in 3 groups, all B&E. I was supposed to receive 1 to 10 years in the state pen for each one, but the judge realized that things weren't what they seemed and instead grouped the charges and sentenced me to 3 to 30, suspended it, and gave me 6 months in county with releases for work, school, and community service. So I pretty much just spent the night in jail for 4-5 months. Really lucky and really not too bad. I won't say that I was innocent, but I also won't say that I was remotely guilty of what I was charged with or what I pled guilty to. My PO, that's another whole series of stories, decided I was the poster child for reform and had me speak to her interns about recidivism and corrections, and then for an unknown reason decided I was bad and tried 3 times to revoke my probation, all unsuccessfully. I graduated with a 3.7 overall GPA in 2003. I did 3.5 years in Texas prisons. I believe that the worst story I can recall was my first full day in a state jail facility, used as a transition center for up to 2 years before one is sent to a real prison in Texas. A guy came up to me asking if I smoke cigarettes. I didn't but thought, why not? So he told me to head to the gym when that time came later that afternoon. We went to the gym and fired up a cigarette while we walked around the basketball court. As we were walking around the court, we approached the universal gym machine, where a variety of people were using the various pieces to work out. The guy who offered me the cigarette advised me to follow him to the other side of the basketball court and to stay away from the universal gym. A few minutes later a guy sat down and leaned back to do some bench press when 4 guys grabbed him, 1 on each arm and 1 on each leg. 2 other guys pull out cans of chili or refried beans as both were available in socks and proceed to hammer the guy in the face. The guy at the bench press had his face completely caved in. All I could think was, what have I gotten myself into? I also recall one other time when I was at the pre-release facility at the beta unit where a guy had his face cut up with a box cutter and his throat slit over $20. The guy who died even had about $40 worth of cigarettes on him when he died. I never had anything happen to me directly per se. There were a few fights I got into over various things, usually just respect. Now I'm just rambling. Did 7 in Pennsylvania State Prison. Saw a guy who was accidentally cleared by psych to be in general population go out to yard and try to cut his own head off with the razor wire. It was morning yard, not a lot of people out, and he sprinted toward the fence. As soon as he got out there, we all thought, oh shit, we've never seen someone try to get over these forests of razor wire. But then this faker turns around with his back right up against the fence, cops coming from 3 directions yelling into their radios, and he loops a circle of razor wire around his neck and starts sawing. A faking waterfall of blood. Cops froze. Everyone froze. That shit was really unexpected. They told us he lived, but fuck me if I know how point at it. Since you're asking, it happened at C Somerset, down in the lower yard. Yes, most of the razor wire is up top on the fence, but there's a single run about 8 feet up the face of the fence, maybe to just discourage you from testing out the rest of it. He found this one section in the corner of the yard, where the fence makes a bend, where that run was sagging down enough he could reach up and grab it. I always thought the pain reflex of holding on to faking razor wire would made him stop, but nope. The craziest part is that prison can be months and months of literally the same thing over and over and over, like everything's painted the same color. Then that guy over there is trying to cut his head off. Oh wait, huh, like that. And prison doctors faking suck so hard. Probably gave him ibuprofen and sent him on to the hospital. He did it cause he was crazy. Came late and I've shared in a similar thread about the guys getting beat to death in front of me, so I'll share my worst that I was involved in. I was arrested in a different state after skipping out of my home state. While waiting for extradition back they don't fuck around. County maximum security. I'm in with the worst of the worst. All murder, rap, kidnapping charges. So my only experience with jail prior to this was watching the Shawshank Redemption Oz prison shows on TV. So I'm scared shitless. I'm a big guy. At the time 6'6", about 280 lbs. Pretty solid fighter, but I know I'm in with hardened criminals that will kill me for a cupcake, or so I thought. Anyway, first day in I stay in my cell. Sleep all day, think about my life. Halfway through the day a group of the biggest guys come in and ask for my papers to make sure I wasn't a bedo. Later I talk to my cellmate a bit, and he seems nice. Says he needs a spades partner and I know how to play. He says the next day we will play, and he will show me around. Next morning we sleep in, and around 11 go down, and get a game. I'm like a scared rabbit looking around checking my back just waiting to get shanked. We get to playing, and I'm getting to know the guys. Everyone seems cool. I'm good at spades, and so is my cellie, so we are kicking ass. After a few games the other team is getting agitated, and I'm gloating a bit. So the guy to my right eventually gets upset and starts yelling calling me a cheat and this and that. I brush it off, but am on full alert just waiting for a fight. So when he yells fuck this and fuck you, he stands up, and I pop up, and blast him in the face as hard as I can. He crumples to the ground and starts spitting out teeth. Everyone in the common area just stares at me like what the fuck? It was later explained that people get upset at card games, but never fight in view of guards. Edit. After typing this, I realized how tame it is. If anyone wants to hear about the guy getting beat to death I'll type it for ya. Not an ex-con paresi, but you might find this story a bit interesting. I stayed in Thailand for an extended vacation, 6 months. To train in Muay Thai. My dad is Thai, was taught since childhood, also as a sort of finale to my normal life training camp, before entering medical school. This is relevant later, I get arrested for possession of marijuana, quite a substantial amount too, and of course, sent to jail. I had to stay in jail a few days whilst my uncle was settling the fine. Parents were in the Philippines at the time, as my mom is Filipino. Anyway, my 4th day in jail, a fight breaks out because this dude stole the other guy's blanket. I was surprised how fights break out over petty things. Anyway, there were 4 of us in there. Me and the 4th guy try to break up the fight. He was a pretty sensible man, so the dude who got his blanket stolen, attacker, was over the other dude. And he was sorta punch slapping him. Anyway, as I pull him back, he spins around to me and by instinct, I leap back. Guy pulls out a short ice pick looking thing and charges at me. I don't know what I was thinking at this point. It was probably instinct though, as I kick him in the face. Shin landed on his zygomatic bone / side of face, and he falls to the ground. Blood starts to gush out. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't think I would cut him with a kick to the face, as it rarely happens in Muay Thai, but when the guards come in and turn him over, I shit you not, the edge of his mouth till his upper cheekbone, close to the eye, was wide faking open. Dude looked like a bloody version of Joker's face. I get bailed out 2 days later. Slap on the wrist. My uncle managed to pull through point anyway. I was able to enter medical school as my mother is a pediatrician, and all of this has been left behind us. I'm currently in my second year of med in the Philippines. Earlier this sem, in our surgery class, our professor, a surgeon of course, talks about how he stitched up this prisoner when he volunteered in Thailand during our suturing module. Apparently the prisoner was kicked in the face, and he even had a picture of the prisoner in his PowerPoint presentation. Anyway, I have to head off to school. Be back in a few hours to answer whatever questions, if this gets any reply at all lol. Did 4 years 4 months in a prison in Colombia, South America. For most people that are sentenced to more than a year, prison becomes a vacuum cleaner that sucks up your savings, your marriage, relationships. It is a really hard time for most. I was engaged at the time. She hung in there for about a year and we parted ways. For you, life screeches to a halt while life rolls along on the outside. One interesting thing that happens is that prison is like a filter that sorts out who your friends really are and who are your real friends. It goes the same with family. Prison is also hard on you psychologically. You have time, a lot of time to think. For most people, being left alone with their thoughts can be stressing. One thing that would reduce any tough guy into a quivering coward was the word remisión, which is the term used when they transfer convicted inmates to other prisons around the country. No one wanted that. It wasn't a good thing. While I was there were riots, got tear gassed a bunch of times. One time the big boss gave the order that every cell block barricade themselves, and one cell block took a couple of guards prisoner. This was on the news, and it was a big deal. They brought in the GRI, Grupo de Reaction Inmediata, Group of Immediate Reaction, sort of a SWAT for prisons. These guys came seriously armed. When they ran in front of our cell block gate, all the guys ran into the cell block. Me and 2 other less experienced convicts stayed by the door watching. When one of them stood in front of the door and pointed his H&K MP5 at us. I don't know anything about guns, but the other inmates were calling it out. We put our arms in the air. The guy next to me starts screaming, "Don't shoot us, we are not armed." The other guys started praying, so I called out the same thing, "Please don't kill us." The GRI officers start yelling, "Shut the fuck up and pull your pants down." We do exactly that, and we took our shirts off for good measure. The guy tells us to get on our knees, hands on top of our heads. We are only in that position briefly, because shots ring out from another cell block. The guy and some others run toward the gunfire and me, and the 2 other guys run into the cell block. The first thing the prison does is cut off the power, phones, and electricity. We were on lockdown for 2 days. It was really intense, and I really thought we were done for. One night everyone is in bed sleeping, when suddenly someone starts screaming in pain. I thought that someone was getting killed. I was scared shitless, because you have nowhere to run, nowhere to go. But I started hearing people getting up and talking. It turned out that a roach crawled into the guy's ear. After that it was toilet paper in your ears when you go to sleep. One day a young kid got caught stealing some old guy's disposable razor. The old man was begging the houseman not to hit the kid, but it was too late. Examples have to be made. We all had to stand by and watch this poor kid get beat like an animal. Afterwards I wasn't the only one with tears in my eyes. Another terrible thing was on visiting days. We would all bunch up by the gate of the cell block waiting for our visits. You would see a new inmate receive his visit and most would break into heart-wrenching sobs. That was hard to watch, mostly because you remember the day it happened to you. Mothers, wives, brothers, sisters, they were all heartbroken, and it was your fault. It just sucked. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't just one thing, it was many. Sorry for the long post. My experience is pretty weak compared to most of these other posts, but here it is. I haven't told this story in a few years, so this is as best as I can recall it. I did a mere 6 months in a county jail for false public alarm in 2006. I was young, I was dumb. Whatever, I only had one bad experience, and it was on my third day there. Woke up for showered 630 am. At this jail, they delivered your pre-trade food to your cell block, and at this time I was in intake block, where you stay for a few days, before they put you in Gen Pop. There wasn't a cafeteria type line or anything. Anyway, I get my food and sit down at the table next to my cellmate, who happened to be a fairly large, skin-headed Nazi type dude. Sorry, can't think of a less offensive way to describe him. And we were talking, normal sheet. Suddenly I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's this massive black dude. Very intimidating looking, jacked dude. He says to me, "Give me your food." I was scared, no joke, but I thought to myself, this is jail, man, stand up for yourself. So I said no. Again, "Give me your faking food." "No, you already have food." He gets in my face and yells / spits, "Jim, your food," and went to grab my tray. I thought fast and decided fuck it, and knocked my entire tray of food on the floor. There have it, you want it so bad. No. Sooner had I said that when I saw stars. Guy sucker punched me right in my left eye. Surprised I didn't get KO'd. Did get a pretty nasty black eye, though. My cellie sprung immediately to action, along with 2 other skinhead dudes who were at the next table, and they start pummeling this dude. I threw in a few kicks to his body while he was down. Never got to do that before. Guards show up, break it all up. Me, dude, cellie, and the other 2 dudes get put into segregation solitary while they investigate. I thought to myself at this time, well, there goes my good time. Day for me, great. Seg sucks. I was in there for 1 sleep and another half day when guards come and let me out. Turns out we had a snitch in our block. Gave the guards a completely detailed account of how it went down. Me and my cellie, not sure about the other 2 guys, as I never saw them again, got to go back to our block. Never saw big black dude again. It was a scary situation. And the only situation where I felt unsafe or feared for my life. I'm sure it's worse in prison, but I was only in jail. All in all, 6 months in county felt more like summer camp. I learned my lesson and have, and continue to be, a free man. I worked as a guard in a military prison for 4 years, and after reading the stories in here, I'm glad as fuck I didn't transition to federal corrections when I got out. The sheet I read about in here, I didn't see either, but my buddy witnessed 2 events. One where a guy in the labor yard took his shovel and full on swung it into the side of a guy's face. Shattered his jaw, and dropped like a sack. Lived. After his surgeries were done, he was transferred to a different facility. Another guy was an MP who was the arresting officer of an inmate when the MP was sent to the jail. I don't remember what he did, probably some possession charge. We had a few prior MPs in the jail. He didn't remember the guy at all, but the inmate broke his jaw with an elbow coming out of the shower one day. His wasn't so bad off as the first guy. He stayed for the rest of his sentence, but was kept in a different block than the other inmate. The head cook was pimping out her female cooks to the inmates. Their families would wire money to the head cook, who would then get that inmate assigned to kitchen duty so they could fuck the female cooks. As a result of this, we had to man an extra guard to stay in the kitchen at all times. The head cook was sent to Leavenworth and the two she was pimping out were dishonorably discharged from the army. Outside of that, the worst altercation I've seen was 2 inmates fighting in a block and knocking the TV over. 40 inmates in the block collectively went oh shit, no, and once the fight was over they were all asking us to check on the TV and hoping it still worked. Didn't give a shit about the 2 bloody dumb bases we took to segregation. That TV though, fortunately it did still work. Put it back on its stand and plugged it back in and came right back up. The place I was at was mostly pretty laid back. We had a saying, it's 360 days of boredom with 5 days of excitement. It's worst in the hot days of summer and around Christmas. Tempers flare and everyone is depressed. There was also a time where a female guard was doing a block check and walked into the shower, which wasn't on, and found an inmate laying along the wall, head/neck on the floor, back and legs up the wall, jacking himself off cause he was trying to eat his own cum. She wrote him up for that. Was faking hilarious to read that report. One guy had a heart attack in the rec yard. One of the inmates we had was a ranger medic. He was there because his chute line got stuck jumping from a plane and he shattered his jaw. Seems like there's a trend. And when he recovered he had permanent jaw pain. Since he was a medic he kept writing his own narcotic prescriptions so he wouldn't have to see the doctor, which is a big no-no. So he was sent to jail for drug abuse. Anyway, when the inmate had a heart attack in the rec yard, we sent a newbie private to run up to Delta Block for this inmate cause he was the only one the guards knew had any experience with this kind of sheet. When the paramedics arrived he gave a full account to them of everything that was going on and very well could have saved that guy's life. Happened to someone close, let's call him X, put in maximum security Australian jail for 3 years. So basically, each inmate was given a loaf of bread. This bread was meant to last you, and you ration it for eating throughout the week. You had bread and water and the meals given to you throughout the day. No other food was allowed to be bought or kept in the block. Now, the rule that no one is meant to break is faking with someone's bread. Because if the guards go on strike you literally don't eat, you're locked in your cell with water and bread. Most jails are now run privately, but used to be all be run by the government. This was 16 years ago. At first I was like, no way, they have to feed you. They have to have guards people to look after sheet. Well apparently not. Some guards did go for the $$, not enough to monitor everyone and feed everyone. Now I'm not sure why, but cheating in stuff is super popular in jail. Especially women's jail. Another personal story, and people would cheat in beds, pillowcases, under the mattress. X was cunning, never really getting caught, and never really not noticing. Like how do you lay your head in a pillowcase full of sheet? This kind of stuff did you get you bashed, but not really a big deal apparently. Most inmates had 2 pairs of shoes, X was down to 1 pair. And this aboriginal fellow shat in his shoes, and managed to get bay powder, to mask the scent. Oh no, he stepped in sheet. But wait, there is more point. This was literally 2 weeks before his release. So X for 2 weeks ripped a hole in his mattress, and shat in it. For 2 weeks. Non-stop sheeting in his mattress, and sleeping on the floor. The day before his release he switched the beds, when he got a chance, and while that was happening also shat in his bread. So this aboriginal is left with a mattress filled with sheet, can't swap it, can't get a new one, until someone else leaves. TLDR, guy I knew shat in a mattress for 2 weeks then left it with someone who shat in his shoe. I did months in Salinas Valley State Prison in California. I'm white, and considered a square, no tats and not gang affiliated. I got called up with a Mexican kid who was a member of the Salinas, Southern California Mexican gang. He tried to take my bunk, which was the bottom, and about more coveted. Of course I wasn't going to get punked, and told what to do. Right before dinner he pulled my jacket over my head, and started punching me. Just for reference, I'm a Sandan, 3rd degree black belt, in Aikido. I stood up and repelled him. I had him pinned by an arm lock and a squeeze of his nose and jaw. He said he would quit. He came at me again. When I let him go, I blended his punches and got him in another arm lock and headlock and showed him I could crush his skull on the bunk. I told him to chill out and we would talk sheet out. He said we were cool. I saw his fists balled up and he was ready to swing again. I told him, no wonder your mother killed herself. You are a disgrace. He came at me again and this time I started punching. I had his head clamped and I was jumping my knees into his face and body. I heard the clanging of keys and new guards were on their way, so I dove to the ground and covered my head. They opened the cell as he was weakly raining punches on my covered head. They beat the shit out of him and pepper sprayed him. I didn't have a mark and said we just had a misunderstanding and things were cool. He said he was going to get me, so he was put in administrative segregation. Crazy day. Nothing bad happened to me, really. I did see some fights. One girl punched another girl square in the face and nearly broke her jaw over salt and pepper shakers. In prison, we all worked in a factory setting, and one girl had her foot run over by the electric pallet jack. It was faked up, and she had to be hospitalized, and then on bed rest for months, then was only able to do in-house work, and couldn't go back to the factory. The worst thing that happened to me personally is going to sound kind of vain. I waited 11 months in county to be sentenced. If I ended up with over a year, I would end up going to prison. The day of my sentencing I got 2 years. Going to prison meant cutting my hair. Prison rules state it has to be above shoulder length. I had been growing my hair out for years. It was past my waist. It's really the only feature I liked about myself. I didn't want the prison guards to have to cut it, so the day of sentencing I went back to my pod and cut my own hair with a pair of nail clippers. I was all cried out from my sentencing, but some of the older women cried at me cutting off all that beautiful hair. I explained that I didn't want to go through the dehumanization of someone else cutting it, so I hacked it off myself. The good news is, I don't have a problem with getting my hair cut anymore. I just recently cut it to a little bit shorter than shoulder length, and I have bangs and everything now. But I still don't let anyone else cut it. I only cut it myself. It's sort of stupid, but they take so much away from you. I didn't want them to have my hair too. My longest sentence was 180 days at 75% and 11 months 29 days at 75% ran consecutive, meaning 1.5 years. I made trustee during my stay, so I was released in just under 8 months. Within the first week I got a letter from my girlfriend informing me that a good friend of mine from high school, who I had recently gotten back in touch with, shot himself after getting into an argument with his mom, after she told him the whole world would be better if you just blew your brains out. A day after my birthday I called my mom, as we talked on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and she told me my grandmother died. This was 3 weeks after my friend died. Sometime during my 3rd month I got a letter from a friend telling me my girlfriend had been faking this random dude since 3 days into my incarceration. We had been together for 6 years at this point, and both charges I was charged for were, in truth, her charges. I owned up to them because I didn't want her to do time. I know better than to do anything like that for anyone now. A friend I knew from elementary school became a trustee, and we struck up our old best friendship on the inside. He got out before me, and 2 weeks after his release I was told he had overdosed. My father constantly wrote me letters apologizing about not coming to visit me, promising me he'd come the next week, apologize again for not having the time, and then tell me how he hung out with family friends that lived in the town I was incarcerated in. My cheating girlfriend also came to jail to tell my cat was killed by some dogs in our neighborhood. I was expecting my dad to be visiting me that day, so I was doubly upset by seeing her and hearing that I'd never get to see my best buddy Waffles ever again. He'd never drink beer with me again. Other than all the bad news I got from the outside, the inside wasn't too bad. Some guards were dicks, most were okay. My girlfriend spent $5 of my money while I was in and failed to put a dime on my books, but I solved that by buying 2 packs of ramen noodles for a tray of lunch and sat at the poker table until I had $250 on my books. I'm not that great of a card player, but I guess the guys I played with were even worse, and since I was diabetic I got a snack at night. That was a milk, 2 sandwiches, cookies, chips and an orange. I sold every bit of that every night for a total of $3 on my books or $5 worth of items. Inmates couldn't transfer funds, so it was easier to give me 5 items than it was to get $3 on my books. Since I did laundry for the entire jail I'd get requests for underwear, shirts and socks all the time, and I charged $2 a week for 2 new pairs of everything. I got my hustle on in jail because no one gave a fuck about me in jail. That is something you'll learn when you get locked up. You'll find out who your real friends are. The people that write you really care about you. You most likely won't be visited by anyone but family, if they care enough, but those letters are the best thing in the world. I found out no one really cared about me when I was locked up. At one point I went 2.5 months without any mail, at which point I wrote my father and told him to go fuck himself, and that the only thing I wanted from him was 40-something cents a week, in the form of postage on a letter, and some words he wrote down. The worst thing. That's a matter of perspective, I think. When I tell people about my experiences in prison, the things they react to as being wrong or awful don't necessarily register the same way to me. The things I see as the worst are hard to explain in a way that people who haven't been through it understand. I'll give an example of each point. The worst thing I feel like ever happened to me from my own perspective wasn't an actual event, I guess. I was walking across the courtyard, headed back to my housing unit from the chapel after an evening service. The prison was basically shaped like a giant circle with spokes coming out of it at odd angles, the courtyard being the center of the circle. It was nighttime, mid-spring, and a beautiful out. I could see stars, and I had a generally pleasant feeling as I was walking. About halfway across the courtyard, the thought hit me that I was walking home. At that moment, I stopped dead in my tracks. The word home rising up in my head in reference to that place terrified me. It was the moment I realized that I was not resisting institutionalization nearly as well as I thought. It suddenly brought the fears about what getting out would be like, and how difficult it might be, whether I'd simply end up as one of the people who find it easier to just go back to prison. At that point I still had more than 5 years left until I'd go home. I didn't sleep that night because of worrying, and became almost paranoid about the path of my own thoughts from that point forward. The very worst thing I could imagine for myself was accepting that place as home, and I almost did. Point now, one of the stories that other people react to more. I was lucky enough at one point to have a single cell in the first prison I was in. I appreciated it greatly, for reasons I'm sure don't need to be explained. The one issue with the cell, which didn't seem so pressing when I first moved into the room, was that the window didn't shut completely, a louvered window that you could open and close the slats by turning a knob at the bottom. It was warm when I first moved in, and for a couple of months after. When it began to cool down, especially at night, I told the officer in charge of my unit about it, and he put in a work order to have it fixed. It was never fixed, even when the temperatures dropped so low that the toilet water had a thin layer of ice in the morning. Both toilets and sinks are usually in the room with you, sometimes as part of the same apparatus. I had to wear every single article of clothing in my possession, just to be warm enough not to have my teeth constantly chattering. I realize how faked up that was now, because the first time I told the story, it was in response to a conversation about being cold, and the two people I told it to got really upset on my behalf. I didn't see it as something to be upset over at the time, because it was just another instance of how inmates were always treated. I didn't really expect anything better to happen for me. I've got a bunch of stories like that, and dozens if you open up to what I saw other people go through as well. Edit to clarify what water had frozen. I was a county inmate being held in a federal hold pod in a northern Utah county jail. It was my first and only charge, misdemeanor theft, and I ended up doing 14 months for it, 2 months while awaiting court process and 12 months when probation was revoked for leaving the state. Anyhow, the place was a mess. You had a sprinkling of short-time county inmates and a whole bunch of people awaiting huge federal sentences. My cellmate, for example, was indicted for his involvement in 99 gang-related murders. There was a large population of white supremacists, some of whom I would play cards with. When I first got there, I had no idea of prison lingo, nothing. Smash cut to a weekend, and we are playing spades in the common area with everyone else. The scariest man I have ever seen in my life smacks down the queen of spades on me to win. I laugh and say, "You faking punk. Good game." You could hear a pin drop in that place. He looks at me and calmly says, "If my own mother called me a punk, I would slit her throat and watch her die." I had no idea what to do and simply stuttered my way through telling him I had never been to jail and did not understand the gravity of what I said. I then apologized. He sat for what seemed like hours and the room stayed silent. He then said apology accepted, and we started another game. My cellmate later asked me if I knew how close I got to being killed that night. After I had been arraigned in state $6mm bail, cash only, I was sent to North Avenue Jail in Bridgeport. The police chief and I were having a "are you out of your faking mind" argument, so in addition to ensuring the highest bail ever in the state of court, he informed the doc that I was dangerously psychotic with the mind of a 6-year-old. I passed the Mensa test in 1991. I was stripped naked and thrown in a dry, no sink or toilet, psych cell, and left there for a week. No bed, no mattress, just a plastic boat. I was taken out, naked and shackled to the toilet twice a day. I pissed in a bottle in my cell. I was given 3 Nutriloaf a day and a half gallon of water. No paper, no books, no phone calls, no visits. I asked to contact my attorney and was ignored. No one spoke to me. Finally, 11 days after I had arrived, I was thrown a pair of boxers, double shackled and taken to see the doc, the unit psychiatrist. After sitting in his office for an hour while he shuffled papers and looked up sheet on his laptop, he finally stood up, walked over to me, got 3 inches from my face and said, "What is your name? Do you understand me?" "Yeah, I understand you. Now get the fuck out of my face. Do you know where you are? I assume this is your office." He looked puzzled, went and read some papers. "Who's president of what the US? George faking Bush." He angrily goes to the phone and calls a warden or some such official. "Who the hell put this guy on my unit? He's not a level 1. He's completely lucid. Come and get him." He waved to the co's and they dragged me back to my cell. 12 hours later, 2 fat guys showed up from one of the toughest spots in Connecticut, Walker Reception and Special Management Unit, put me in a van and started driving. This is CT's pre-trial Supermax, and I had the highest bail, including multiple murderers, huge weight dealers, rapists and the worst of the worst. It's the only place I faced death. A few times I was in for damaging a portable toilet. Eventually, the state realized my offense was a misdemeanor and should not be where I was. So the police chief gave me to the feds, but nothing during my bid was as grim as that 10 days alone and naked in a concrete cell. Part 1, third best prison story ever from Craigslist. Long but great read. Rave. My life since getting out of prison. I graduated from college in May, and this summer seemed like a good time to go through the box of papers and assignments I had been saving since the start, both to reminisce and to do a little cleanup. Tucked in a folder of an old notebook at the very bottom of the box was the essay that follows. Written in longhand, it was the first assignment from the first class in my first semester. January 20th, 2003. English 1A. Professor, my best summer memory. Hey man, I'm not really sure if you're supposed to put an introduction in this thing, but here goes anyway. My name is XXX. My assignment today is to write an essay about the best thing that happened to me this last summer. I know everybody's been kinda looking at me in class, wondering why a dude in his 30s is taking English 1A instead of being out there working a job. I'm not too keen on talking about myself much. Most folks aren't, I guess, unless they are Paris Hilton. But since the assignment is a personal essay, I suppose I don't have much choice. Anyways, the best thing that happened to me this last summer was when I finally got out of prison. Based on that DNA evidence. I'll tell you man, if you can't appreciate getting out of prison, then you haven't been there to begin with. For me, it started about 3 years ago when this chick got murdered in East San Jose while opening up her plumbing supply shop. Me and Meryl came by a couple weeks later to pick up some PVC for a sprinkler repair, and for some reason the dude behind the counter thought we was a little suspicious, so he called the cops. They put me in a lineup, but of course the dude already knew what I looked like and what clothes I was wearing, so it wasn't that tough to pick me out. Other than that, there was no real evidence, but I didn't have an alibi, and I had a couple drunken disorderlies on my record back from when me and Meryl used to fight each other for fun after closing time. They had it in their minds I was guilty, and they kept after me for 2 days, yelling and throwing stuff at me, and telling me made up stories about how Meryl told them I did it. I always figured I was pretty tough, but after a while it just wore me down. I had to look at some pictures of death row, and I got showed on my arm where the needles would go, and everybody called me dead man walking. They told me if I signed a confession I wouldn't get the death penalty, and I had to think about that one pretty hard. The lawyer they assigned to me smelt like he'd been pulling a cork during lunch, and he fell asleep while they was questioning me. I knew I didn't do nothing, but sometimes life just ain't all fair, and this seemed like one of those times. So I signed. After the sentencing, Meryl sold my truck and moved all my stuff into storage for me and promised me he'd look after Muscle Shoals, my black lab. They sent me up to San Quentin, and when I got there, I was put in the section with the black dudes. I found out later that's what they do with new prisoners, except the blacks end up in the white section. I guess it's to soften up the new inmates. I dunno. Whatever the reason, it didn't take long for them to find this palaface. One day I turn around, and there they stood, The welcoming committee point, it didn't take but one look to realize they weren't there to bring me a fruit basket. I figured this was gonna be a test of me, find out if they could push me around. So I got a good shot in on the first one and broke his nose. Since it was 4-on-1, I was looking at an ass kicking for sure, so I didn't follow up on the others too much to try and keep back him from getting too mad. Well man, was I ever wrong about that. They got me face down, one on each arm and leg, then they got my pants down. About this time, right up till the last minute, I was thinking, this can't be happening to me. The dude whose nose I broke went first. I was heaving and twisting my body trying to get loose, but the others held me down good. He started to poke around and then forced himself in. I never in my life had anything hurt like that, man. Everything got all cloudy and I heard him call me his white beach. Bits of snot and blood from his nose dripped down on the cement next to my head. It's the only time in my life I ever tried to talk to God. First I asked him why, then I asked him to help me. And he never said a word. The only thing worse than being shined on by God is having it happen at a time like that, man. But it's just like the preachers say, you can't fool God. He knows why you're finally talking to him, because you need help. So God never answered me, and I was on my own. And the only thing I wanted to do was to die. When he was done, he got up and kicked me in the head. That in a way was kind of a blessing. Cause I don't remember anything that happened after that for a while, and I'm pretty sure the rest of those dudes took their turns a few weeks later. They came around again. I knew what was coming this time, and I didn't hold anything back. I popped 3 of them pretty good before they got me down and did me again. They got the better of me, no question, but I left them worse for wear. That was the first time I ever saw a black eye on a black dude. By this time I was hoping they'd think I just ain't worth the trouble. There were plenty of others there that were easier pickings than me, but this wasn't about finding someone for such, it was about breaking me down. So I got another visit from my new buddies. This time, they kinda formed a circle around me before moving in, and I could see in their eyes that some of them weren't really looking forward to this at all. Well man, welcome to the fucking club. This time I ended up in the prison hospital and spent a couple weeks there. One day, I was laying there thinking about how much I hurt and wondering what a life sentence was gonna be like with this happening all the time, when one of the inmates working in the hospital starts talking to me and tells me about the Aryan Brotherhood and how I don't have to put up with the new grass no more as long as I join up with them. And that's how I ended up with the tattoo of the swastika and white power on my arm, right up there by the bishop. Well, time goes by, and I'm getting settled into the routine of prison life, and no one is messing with my behind no more, now that I'm in this white guy gang. Then from out of the blue I find out that someone from the Pine Hills Youth Correctional Facility in Montana got religious, and wrote a letter confessing to killing that chick. He was just a kid, only 17 years old. Can you believe that? Well, no one at San Quentin did. No one takes you seriously when you tell them you're innocent, cause everybody in prison says they are innocent. I didn't have the letter or anything, just what I heard, so no one gave a shit. So I wrote to Merrill, and he sent some dude from the Innocence Project to visit me. Next thing I know, the prison doctor is scraping some skin from the inside of my mouth, and one day, just like that, they're walking me out the door and on my way. Course it didn't take more than 5 minutes to be up to my ass in ambulance chasers all wanting to help me sue the government for my troubles. Most of them didn't smell much different than the public defender, and I began to wonder if I was ever gonna get a lawyer who wasn't a full down drunk. The dudes at the Innocence Project gave me the name of some chick up in San Francisco to call. That was kinda far away for me, but she turned out to be a pretty good lawyer and didn't smell of booze either. She spent a lot of time yelling at the guys from the city, and let me tell you man, after listening to that I sure was glad she was working for me and not them. In the end, I got some money, not a lot, cause I wasn't in all that long, and of course I didn't tell a soul about the other stuff, but it was enough to get my trailer and a good truck, and they also promised to pay for a training, which is why I'm taking this class. Continued below. In the mid-80s I got a 3-year sentence, but 2.5 years were suspended, so I had 6 months to do. It was a federal crime, which meant federal penitentiaries, but if you are going to be in for less than 1 year, they generally just shuffle you around small municipal joints until your time is up, and that's what they did with me. First 45 days was at Richmond Jail in Virginia. A true shithole. We didn't have cells. Instead, we were kept in dorms meant for 20 or so men, but about 60 were there. I was a white-collar criminal, credit card fraud, and I was in with murders. I ended up doing well, because I was a big 6 feet 4 inches muscular guy and no one faked with me. I'm glad, because I'm really a bussy. But I digress. One kid came in one day. He was about 18, I guess. And he came across as being slightly retarded. He was a child molester. Prisons have a hierarchy of crime and child molestation is at the very bottom. The guy would get dragged into the showers, which were not in a separate room or anything, and would be wrapped every night. We'd all hear him screaming and yelling. Guards wouldn't do shit. 3 or 4 black dudes had their way with him each night. In my dorm there were also 2 or 3 tyrannies that would set up the bunks in such a way that they could drape sheets over them and give blowjobs or whatever other sexual favors in exchange for smokes or money. The guards knew everything that was going on, but did nothing. We even had 5-gallon buckets and would make what we thought was prison hooch to get drunk, but it never worked for me. The next 45 days was in Henrico County Jail, which was the Taj Mahal compared to Richmond. No drama. My own cell, and about 10 of us in our own cell block. Good Bible study and library. The final 45 days was in Grafton County, West Virginia. The prison was ancient. I think it might have been built in the late 1800s. I was a trustee there and got all the food I wanted. The prison was small with maybe room for 60 or so maximum. On Fridays the warden would give me $10 and let me out to walk down to the convenience store to buy beer for him. Then they let me go early. No money. Just the clothes on my back. They drove me back to Washington DC, dropped me off on a corner, and said see ya, don't fuck up now, and drove back to West Virginia. Well, I broke out my old throwaway, so you can see the details of why I was in my past post. I made the mistake of letting it be known that I knew one of the guards from the outside. She had a part-time job where I worked before being locked up. Mind you, I didn't tell anyone in any official capacity, just let it slide to my cellmate casually. I passed her maybe twice while going from here to there in the hallway. I didn't acknowledge her, she didn't acknowledge me. One day I get called to center control, and I'm told to wait there. A few minutes later, she comes around the corner and tells me to follow her. She takes me in a room and tells me you don't know me. It took me a minute, but I pick up on what she is saying and ask if I can go. I start heading back to my unit when another officer calls out to me and tells me to go back to center. When I get there, a sergeant is waiting for me and tells me to turn around. They pat me down, place me in handcuffs and shackles, and march me somewhere. At one point they jerk me violently to the left, tearing my meniscus. I'm put in an isolation unit for 5 days without being told what is going on or why I'm there. Other inmates in the isolation unit start asking me why I'm up there. They notice no one ever came to present me with disciplinary charges within 24 hours, like they are supposed to. They heard the surrogate step in the cell with me, totally against protocol, when they put me in, and say here's your chance. Which I still am not totally sure what he was talking about. Eventually they come and move me to a different prison, and I could finally call my mom to let her know what happened. I usually called every day, especially then as it was petty early on in my time, and I was still adjusting. She said when she didn't hear from me for a few days, she called the social worker and was told I was under investigation and she couldn't say any more, but that was the reason I hadn't been calling. I never got an answer as to why I was moved or placed in isolation, but when I got my property transferred to the new facility, it was all ruined. Someone had opened up the peanut butter, jelly, mustard, etc. and thrown it all over my stuff. Valuables, radio, batteries, stamps, etc. were of course missing. I was in Bexar County, San Antonio for a month for vagrancy. I was homeless, with an out-of-state ID, instant lockup. I have 2 stories. One don't count, but still good stories, as while we are processing, before we get our jumps, and moved into our pods they have us in these chicken coop looking cells. It feels like cells were made to be 60x60, but are divided into threes by diamond fences. So all the guys processing are bullshitting, talking shit, or trying to sleep. We got lucky, and got the furthest 3 chicken coops next to the females processing. So we got to flirt, and holler at some downers beaches, before going in. Point come to find out one of the guys in the chicken coop next to us had been arrested with his wife, and one of the guys, skinny white guy, made a typical crude amount about how he would fuck her for days. You know, not knowing the 5'11" Hispanic cholo would take offense to that. So out of nowhere the cholo charges the fence, telling the white kid that is faking dead once they get to pop. That's my faking bunny, mother to my children, faking peckerwood. So, as they are talking shit back and forth, the cholo hacks up one of the biggest, most filthy spitwords I have ever seen, and hits the white kid right in the eye. So both are exchanging back shit talk, the comfort of the diamond fence keeping them apart. So about 5 hours later the co says we are being moved into one of the 20x20 to make room for the drunks. So all them threats these dude exchanged is still hanging in the air. Truth be told, I wanted to see this sheet pop off. Obviously no one was gonna faking snitch and make the co's aware of the tension and the error of their ways. So it's about 15 dudes in this pod now. We know the drill. Put bodies in the front of the door, block the view the best you can, and enjoy the show. For about 50 seconds I saw one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen. The sound of skull on concrete is faking brutal, no matter how loud a jail is. Friday night with all the drunks. Everyone heard it. Co's charge the chicken coop and try and break it up, but it's already over. White kid is faked up, the cholo is covered in blood, his eye torn up. So after spending 72 hours in the processing pods, most of the group I came in with was pretty fed up. We had been waiting to get moved into our pods, with new jumps, and to take a comfortable ice sheet without 25 dudes touching shoulders, also a faking shower. The first night they gave us jumps, and blankets, but no actual beds. So for 3 nights we had to sleep on concrete floor, each guy taking a segment of the outer wall, and the unlucky faker next to the sheet and not getting any sleep at night, since everyone took their sheets at night. So we wake up, and are told we are getting moved. So everyone is pretty excited to eat something besides stale bread and rotten smelling bologna from the bagged lunches, a hot shower, and some new jumps. 4 PM rolls through, shift change, and we kinda see our last chance to be moved out, go out the door. The new shift doesn't know anything about the transfer to pods for us and ignores. They split our groups into 2 groups, each into smaller pods than before, and I see a cert team member go by. I guess they had just completed a cell extraction on some kid and faked him up. So the jail is faking humming because the news is getting passed down the pods. So it gets to our pod and it spreads. My loud dumbass is sitting outside the cell because I had signed up to be a trustee and was finish up my paperwork, pass the news along to my pod by saying, "Yo, this faking Ninja Turtle looking tryhard just broke some kid's jaw from the tango." The cert hears me and in full gear comes face to face with me. So I'm feeling the pressure of the pod to not look like a beach. So I buck back and get slammed into the door with his shield and tossed back in the pod. The back of my head is bleeding, so I start faking slamming the door as it's closed. This tied up with the tension of being in these faking pods for 72 hours, the pod faking erupts. Cert squad rolls through and is ready to complete a cell extraction on all of us. But it's 25 guys in this stupid looking L-shaped pod. They can't smoke us out because they gotta actually open the door to throw in smoke. No lunch gate in the holding pods. So they rush the pod, pulling 1 or 2 at a time while pushing the majority of us back. These fakers must have had a hard on for laying on a dude because I get dragged out and dogpiled. The shield on my back cutting into the gash I already had from getting slammed into a door, so we get faked up to say the least. One thing I will say though, to be honest, anytime I hear a story of a co getting stabbed or something, the first thing that comes to mind is, I wonder what that has holded to get someone so faking angry. I spent over a month in Maricopa County lockup point. While I was inside, I, being half black half white, was actually given the choice to join either the Woods, whites, or the kinfolk, blacks. I joined the blacks, even though I was very flattered by the offer. We all lived warehouse style in bunk beds with about 300 to 350 other inmates. There were about 15 of us, and we mostly kept to ourselves, low-key. One day a 6-foot tall Samoan lunkhead gets put in our warehouse and decides to join the kinfolk. I didn't think much of it until one day I look over to see a little Mexican pisser, non-English speaking Latino, getting faked with by this guy. The pisser looks pretty frightened and scampers away. About an hour later our leader comes by and tells everyone we gotta sort this out. Moments later we are in the dining area in the back of the warehouse completely surrounded by somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 pissers with their English speaking leader and every missile they had in the front. I vividly remember thinking, well, this escalated quickly, while trying not to stare at this tiny Mexican man with a Gary curl literally salivating, gnashing his teeth, and cracking his knuckles waiting for someone to throw punches. After seeing we were hilariously outnumbered, I sat down on the stool in front of the dining table trying my hardest not to laugh, as this might be the most ridiculous way I could have ever imagined my life ending. I remember looking around at my homies and just seeing sheer terror, which isn't the comforting facial expression to see on a bunch of badass black guys. Turns out we got lucky and not only had a extremely cool, street smart, politician style leader to defuse the situation. Edit. During the standoff we kept the Samoan in the back to give us the best chance at survival. Why? Because he wanted to take them all on. The rest of us just kind of wanted to make it to dinner intact. TLDR. Me and 15 black guys had a standoff with 150 Mexicans over some bullying. I did 2 years in Mansfield, Ohio. The prison was called Richland. Nothing too bad happened to me as I was a rather large guy and kept to myself, but I saw a lot of faked up shit. One was a guy that got a pass to go to medical during non-yard time. During non-yard time the yard outside recreational area was basically empty. This guy took an extension cord and attempted to hang himself from an overhang near the mess hall. After he had hung himself and was choking, he lit himself on fire. As per regulation they called our block to go eat lunch and our entire 500-man house saw a guy hung by the neck on fire. There was a guy in our block that was a known child molester. He had a son that was incarcerated for drugs that was also a known homosexual. The son and father bunked together with a dad on the bottom bunk. At night the son would suck off black dudes for money. The guy apparently liked black dudes. One night there was a commotion. Apparently the father was pissed that the cork sucking kept waking him up at night, so he heated up a bowl of baby oil and threw it on his son and the black man getting a blue job. Both the son's face and the black dude's junk looked like a mutilated super silly putty. Once, when I was in the bathroom taking a shit, I looked next to me and saw a dude inject heroin into his lip. The guy fished out and smacked his face onto the floor. I could see his bone protruding from the front of his face. I can't go into a lot of detail on this because it was semi-frequent, but I saw many gang stabbings / beatings out on the yard. Like 25 or 50 guys wailing on one poor bastard. I saw a guy that attempted to escape get disemboweled by razor wire. We had a skinny Hispanic co that was very rude and frankly a total asshole. In the mess hall I watched a giant black dude beat the ever-loving shit out of him and shove a plastic knife in his asshole. I saw many fights and stabbings that honestly aren't even mentioning as they became almost standard. One of the most surreal things that happened to me and a buddy used to stand behind the gym in the winter to block the wind while we listened to our little Sony radios. As the song She Loves You by Beatles came on, a bloodied Hispanic guy gets launched around the corner almost at my feet. Then about 8 guys run over and start stomping the shit out of him. She loves you, yeah. Weird. Should be in a Scorsese film. I managed to stay out of trouble because I didn't look for it. I didn't gamble. I didn't borrow. And I stayed away from anyone that seemed like trouble. I did get in 2 fights, for which I was sent to the hole. The fights were because someone stole from me. I'm not typically a fighter, but in prison, if someone steals from you and you do not retaliate, you become a target for much further abuse. I guess it's important to describe my situation first. I was in college at the time. I ended up doing some stupid drunk stuff, and to avoid felony charges I got the maximum sentence for a misdemeanor trespassing, which was 30 days. So I'm in jail and my cellmate was on the phone one night around lockup. The calls made for everyone to get in their cell for the night. However, my cellmate wasn't finished with his phone call. The co-on duty approached him and told him to hang up. At this point my cellmate, who had already and was currently serving assault charges, told the co that he was going to smack the shot out of him. For the next 3 days he was locked in our cell 23 hours a day while they reviewed his case and decided his punishment. On the third day is when it got real fun. We were in our cell during count when 5 or 6 officers arrive outside our cell in full riot gear to escort him to the hall to serve his punishment. My cellie then proceeds to verbally assault the officers, multiple fuck yous etc. He steps down from his bunk, back towards the door, when the officers instruct him to get down on his knees, to which he replies, "Fuck you, I'm not getting on my knees." Well, needless to say our babysitters did not find this amusing. They opened the trapdoor and are preparing to gas us with some military grade mace, the whole time all I'm thinking is great, here I'm a junior in college, serving a walking in the park sentence and am about to get maced. Luckily they pulled me out of the cell next. He eventually complied. But no doubt, the scariest moment during my stay. Part 3/3. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. I wanted to be a big success and fall in love with the prom queen and live in a 4-bedroom house with 2 kids and a Chevy just like white people do in the movies. It didn't take long to figure out that wasn't gonna happen, and things started to look real bad there for a while, like I just told you about. And much as I try to, I'm probably never gonna forget how I got into prison and what happened to me there. But all in all, life really ain't been so bad to me, man. Betty said she thinks I might make a good lawyer someday. I told her I'll be lucky to pass this class, much less make it all the way to law school. But she thinks I can become a lawyer, not one like the city gives you that drinks his lunch, but someone who really helps people, maybe even get some other dudes out to prison that don't belong there either. She said everybody has a destiny in life, and mine is to help people to redeem their lives. How can you not love a chick who talks like that, especially about you? Come to think of it, the best thing that happened to me last summer was meeting Betty. I got me a good woman in that chick. I got someone to calm me down after I get cut off on the freeway by some dick, and to help me express my true feelings without cussing. She's someone who'll open the aspirin bottle for me when I have a hangover, fake an orgasm when I really need her to, and maybe someday, God willing, remind me how many kids we have and what their names are. Guys don't give their chicks enough credit for this sort of stuff, and frankly you dudes out there reading this, if you are not making use of this kinda help then you are not getting full value out of your chick. Point. I'm gonna do my part too. I'm gonna protect her, always. I'm gonna hold her and pet her head and tell her everything's okay when she's feeling sad. I'm gonna nod at her sympathetically while thinking, who fucking cares? While she beaches on and on about some other chick at work who looked at her the wrong way. I'm gonna help her watch football with me, let her change my haircut and clothes all the time, and worry about all the Big Short, so she has plenty of time for chick stuff like shopping and crying. Point. It was a great summer, man. And I'm looking forward to the rest of my life. Point. I got a D for this essay, inappropriate content, and a C- for the course. I was pretty discouraged, but Betty wouldn't let me quit. She said that this might not be my last chance to change my life, but it sure was going to be my best chance, and I should go all out. At the department graduation ceremonies in May, the entire faculty rose and applauded me as I walked up to get my diploma. And then before you know it, everyone else got up and joined in too, and Betty started bawling her eyes out. I was really embarrassed, but fortunately Merrill was there, and he shouted it's about faking time to me, which cracked up everyone and got them back into their seats. In the fall, I'll start law school at Santa Clara University on an Emory scholarship. Merrill is a precinct captain for the Obama campaign. Point. Muscle Shoals went on to live a happy life with Dottie. When his hearing started to go, we noticed that she was helping him to understand when we gave him commands. One by one his parts started to wear out, and on December 24th of last year, my dearest friend licked my hand one last time and then slept away. I buried him on a short hill next to a trail where I used to hike with him and Dottie. The view is beautiful, and when we visit, Dottie will lay next to him for as long as I'm willing to stay. About 3 years ago my grades started to get very good, and it looked like school would stick. I came home one night and told Betty that I thought things were getting better every year, year after year. She started crying and wouldn't tell me why. It took me a long time to figure it out, and when I did I felt pretty sheepish. I asked her, she answered yes, and 9 months to the day of our wedding night, little Tina was born. She's as cute as a bug, and someday when she is old enough to learn about her old man's story, I will take this essay out of storage for her to read. In county nothing really bad happened to me, except trading commissary for a bunch of Clonopin and tack in the mall at once and blacking out. Apparently I was giving away a lot of the rest of my commissary and passing out while eating. I actually think that my commissary was stolen and that's just what people told me happened lol. But other than that some crazy shit happened to my friend in there. I've posted this story before. Long story sorry, I was in Cook County Jail for a few weeks about half a year ago, got arrested for violating probation on a drug case. While I was there I met this kid that was from the same area as me, and I knew his older brother. So this kid was there for about 4 months, and had a lot of time on his hands obviously. We were both neutrons on gang members, and both white, but we made friends with mostly everyone, and we were respected. He ended up being a good friend while I was in there. So this kid's family was not financially stable, and he never got any commissary money, but he was looked out for, and he had his own things he did in order to get by. One being, he made the 2 guns that were really just staples tied to the tip of a pen, pretty much a rubber one. He had made about 5 pens by the time I got there, and had gotten 4 tattoos. He came in with none. So one day he decided he and a few others wanted to get tats, so they made a batch of soot, which is the ink that was made from a melted chess piece and mixed with shampoo. Okay, so here is where the story gets crazy. There was this inmate in there, an older heroin addict who had AIDS. He was getting a tat done by the usual guy on my friend's bunk because it was in the back out of sight and it was a bottom bunk. These types of tats consists of basically stabbing you numerous times, which hurts a lot more than a real tattoo and produces a lot more blood. Personally I would feel uncomfortable tattooing someone with AIDS in such an unsanitary fashion, but the tattoo artist did not seem to mind, neither did my friends whose bunk it was. Anyway, towards the end of the tattoo, the COs came in to do a count, so everyone has to stand by their bunk. It was dormitory style, no cells. So when the COs came apparently the tattoo artist tossed the gun under the mat on the bunk. The older man with AIDS decided he was done for the night and wanted to finish his tat another time or just leave it as is. So my friend who builds the guns and hose bunk, it was decided he wanted to get tatted up again. So they begin the tat and my friend reaches under his bunk and hands the artist the tattoo gun under his bunk, which we would later find out was the same one that just tatted up the guy with AIDS. Having about 5 guns, the artist figured that he handed him one of his clean ones that he had scattered around in case of a shakedown the COS wouldn't find all of them. After they completed the tat, my friend put the gun back under his bunk. Later that night, my friend found that there was another gun under his bunk, the one that he figured was clean. He then looked and found the other 3 guns scattered around the dorm that were hidden, and that's when he realized that the tattoo gun he handed the artist to tat him up was indeed the AIDS tat gun. Now this is the extremely ironic part of the story. The tattoo that he was given with the AIDS needle was the phrase, "Fuck hope, die weird." If my friend ended up getting AIDS and dying from it, then this story would be probably the most ironic case of death ever. I'm aware that it would be very unlikely for him to actually get AIDS in this manner, but I guess it's still possible. He was freaking out when he realized what happened. I don't know what ended up happening to him. I got out, and he stayed in there. I'm sure he's out now, and I hope he got tested. TLDR. My friend while I was in jail got a tattoo right after a guy with AIDS got one, using the same needle. That said, fuck hope die weird. Edit. There were a few crazy fight I witnessed as well. One between this gangster black dude, 90% of the people were being Cook County Chicago, and this white heroin addict who cut himself and had scars all over his arms from it. The black dude picked up a commissary box and threw it at his head. They both snapped and had a lot of good punches in. It was funny because people were joking as the fight was happening saying, "He likes the pain. What are you gonna do, lol." I did 42 days in Suffolk County Maximum Unit on an attempted murder of a peace officer charge. When someone doesn't knock and just begins kicking my apartment door and does not respond to my voice per my who is it? Query. Step 2 is to let the birdshot fly. So he caught a few rounds through the door. Everywhere that wasn't covered with body armor, the guy ate it, but just peppered up his sides, face, neck. I'm shocked he lived, but that's what happens in the city when dirty cops with no warrants think they can just raid anyone's place who is hustling, and because of the game they are involved with, they'll never get it called in. I bounced down my fire escape with my stash and got a lawyer who negotiated my turn in. The police officer I shot, he basically left his partner to bleed out. Never radioed it in. If my girl had not been at my place as a witness and to call 911, that guy would have died. So my first day in, I'm white and Native American. I strip, go into holding in General Pop. After being given a uni, I'm instantly thrown into a 30-man holding cell filled with black inmates. A guy who had to be a size 14, 6'4", 300, basically says to me point blank, "Give me your shoes or I'll knock out your teeth and face fuck you." I said, "What?" And halfway through him yelling his repeat catchphrase at me, I cold corked his ass and he went down and out cold. The next 3 guys who jumped up also went down and I was dragged out by guards, stitched up, taken to dental, and erect to ADSEG. I took some shots, but I ditched them far more deftly. I still believe I got thrown in with the gorillas because I shot a cop. Suffolk County paid me over $250,000 in a subsequent civil settlement because they figured a jury may see it similarly. After a rather well-publicized trial, I was found not guilty due to justifiable self-defense, largely built upon my ex's testimony that neither cop ID'd themselves as cops verbally, neither were wearing a uni, and neither had a warrant or even could feign why they went to kick in my door on the stand. It reeked of a corrupt car ripping off a citizen all day. I thank all that's good the jury saw it for what it was. I was in a total of 42 days, all except day 1 of which was in ADSEG. It was lonely but safe. The library was pretty solid and there were plenty of Maxims and Playboys and such to swap for a canteen item. Not too bad. Most of the guys on my block were rapists and kiddie fiddlers though. I was civil to them, they were civil with me. Word got round about what I did in holding, and no one decided to roll the dice with me. Until I was acquitted and released, though, the thought of that 6x10 reality for life was a foreboding thought. If I ended up doing life, I'd have killed myself, surely. Because that is no life point but yay, read, eat, sleep, wait, rinse, repeat. That pretty much sums up that 42 days. I guess this was happening to me outside of jail and I didn't know it. I had recently, in the last year, separated from my wife and moved from Georgia to California for an important class. While I was out there I started seeing this really sweet girl on and off point. After I ended up in jail I was getting letters from my ex-wife, my current girl, and my ex-fiancé from way back in the day. All of them were concerned about me, and the idea that I may not ever see the light of day again really got under their skin. So I basically had the choice between 3 women of who I would be with when I got out. I wasn't going to get back with my ex. I was still twisted over her to be sure. She cheated on me during a deployment, so the decision wasn't super easy. My ex-wife lived back in Georgia and I just didn't want to walk back into her and her son's life if it wasn't going to be for good. So I chose to stay with my current girl. 3 months went by and I'm working out every day, learning to play cards, keeping my face clean shaven, and fighting for my freedom. When I get out my friends throw me a party at Chili's, and of course I've only got eyes for this girl. I'm so happy to see her. I'm so happy that I think I've found someone I really connect with. She stuck by me through a real tough time, and I was thinking that maybe sometimes in the future I might end up proposing to her if she stays this awesome. When I tried to kiss her that night, she pulled away. After 3 months of being on edge about getting us wrapped or pissing off one of the shock collars inadvertently, this kind of rejection from the girl I chose absolutely destroyed me. I stood there and I didn't know what to do. A lot of fear and sadness was coursing through me, and I was worried this was a nightmare that I was about to wake up from in jail. I have a boyfriend now. Then, why did you write me talking about all the things we were going to do when I got out? Why did you come see me every single visiting day? Why did you tell me you loved me and wanted to be with me? But I didn't say any of those things. I just kind of whispered, oh, okay. She didn't tell me because she thought she was the only thing holding me together in jail. I had made the wrong choice point since that heartbreak. I have not dated seriously. This happened in February 2010 for reference. I have been unable to connect with a girl on any serious level since. So I guess that was the worst part of it all. Part once I got all signed up for school and the dust settled down, I figured I better get rid of that tattoo. So I called up Merrill and told him to come on over and give me a hand with it. We heated up a weeding tool in the barbecue and I bit down on a little stick of wood while Merrill burnt off the tattoo with a weeder. You know, I never stopped biting that stick, but when the flesh started to burn, I tried to push everything out Tammy like emptying a squeezed bottle of Heinz ketchup. All the shame, all the rage I was carrying around inside me since I got out. I just forced it all out Tammy, and I guess I yelled a good deal. Cause Merrill was looking at me kinda funny. When it was done, Merrill's my best friend, and I figured maybe it was okay if I told him about it all, so I did. And when I was done, there was a long silence. Then he kinda looked at me and asked in a quiet voice if I was gonna make him burn my bunghole too and finish the job. That Merrill, he's as dumb as a box of rocks, but he always finds a way to make me laugh. I never really took to queers in the first place, but it ain't cause of what happened to me when I was inside prison. I don't blame the blacks or the queers for it. That stuff really wasn't about color or such. It was about power plays by cons who had to ditch their humanity in order to survive. Still, as everybody knows man, no matter how many times you squeeze the bottle, you can't get every last bit of ketchup out. And for me, I still had some bits of my experience I couldn't get out of my head. Sometimes, I'd be watching TV and just start to feel terribly sad and weak. Muscle Shoals was back with me by then, and he seemed to know something was wrong when I felt like that. He didn't know what, but he'd always come on over anyway and lick my hand and rest his head on my leg. I tell you man, I really love that dog. It was real tough getting back in the saddle with the ladies after what happened to me in prison. I'd always heard that if you so much as touched another guy's privates you were queer for life, and although I was hoping that weren't true, it was hard to think about sex without remembering all the bad stuff. Merrill brought by some chick he was going out with who had a lady friend, and though she was nice and all, I was kinda scared I wouldn't be able to deliver the goods and have to start explaining everything. So I had to pass. About a month after I bought my trailer, I met a nice chick at the park while out walking Muscle Shoals. She's about my age and pretty agreeable. Bet is her name. She has a dog too, a female Dalmatian named Dottie. Muscle Shoals was okay with that, cause he ain't prejudiced, and they got along just great. After we'd been going out for a few weeks, it was my birthday, and she and Merrill came over to my trailer and surprised me with a little cake. After I blew out the candles, they said we could do anything I want, their treat. So we talked about it a while and decided to spend the day out at Great America. Well, I don't know if you've been to Great America lately, but they have this new feature which is a water park, and if you ask me, that part alone is worth the price of admission. After we got in, we headed on over there and changed our clothes in one of the little changing rooms they have nearby. While I was waiting for Betty to change, cause chicks always take forever, took me and Merrill about a minute and Betty about 4 hours. I struck up this conversation with this Filipino dude who was waiting behind me. He had a shirt on, said he's a police officer, so of course I didn't mention anything about being in prison. Then one of the changing rooms opened up, not the one Betty was in, of course, since she takes a million years, so I told the dude to go ahead of me since I had to wait for Betty anyway. He moved on into the room, and then his son, who was maybe 3 or 4 years old, started following him, but he told the son to wait outside. So the kid kinda backstepped a ways without turning around and then reached up and took my hand, and I closed my hand around his, and we stood there a while like uncle and son. It was a great feeling, man. I never got to do that with my dad, cause he passed out on some tracks and got all mashed up by a train when I was only 6 months old, and none of the dudes that mom brought around after that ever stayed more than a couple days. I didn't really know what I was supposed to do, so I just stood there and tried not to squeeze his hand too hard. Pretty soon though I heard this laughing behind me, and it's the kid's mom. And I look down at him, and he's looking over at her, and his forehead gets all crinkly, and he looks at his hand in mine, and you can see him sort of follow my arm all the way up to my shoulder, and to my head. When he figured out I wasn't his mom, his eyes got real big, and he yanked his hand away, and scampered over to where she was sitting. Well, by this time his mom is pretty much doubled over with laughter, and she and I are talking, and of course Betty comes out right about then, and sees me talking to this hot Filipino chick, and gives me the stink eye. But it didn't take too long before I'm the one who was upset cause Betty is wearing this string bikini top, and let me tell you man, if I had charged $1/4 a peek for a look at her tatas I would have made a fortune that day. Betty looks a lot like Salma Hayek, especially when she gets mad, which is all the time, geez, and she has a really nice rack point. But you see man, this is where chicks are really sneaky. Betty knew we was going to a water park and there'd be lots of chicks to look at, and she didn't want me looking at them. So she wore her most revealing outfit cause she knew I'd have to keep an eye on her. At a place like Great America there are tons of buff dudes walking around trying to grab your chick when you're distracted. So you got to keep your eye out every minute, and that cuts into your time cruising the hotties. And speaking of that, I think next time I'm gonna tell Betty how much I enjoy checking out the babes while she's goofing around in the dressing room. That ought to speed her up. We had a great time and ate crummy food, and I won a SpongeBob doll for Betty at the pitching booth. Meryl almost got in a fight with some dudes who stole a big doll from one of the other carnival booths, but the rent-a-cops broke that one up before it started. Later he got sick after going on the Invitigo, and we got to watch him puke in a trash can. That part wasn't so good, but after it got dark the fireworks started going off, and Betty snuggled up to me real close, and I forgot all about Meryl, and we kinda lost him. It worked out okay though in the end. Meryl called me later and told me that when he got out to the parking lot he ran into the same dudes he almost got in a fight with, and they ended up going out drinking, and they're his dogs now. I never heard Meryl call anyone that before, but he don't generally hang out with black dudes either. After the fireworks was done, Betty came back with me to my trailer, and we started watching American Idol. Well, one thing led to another, and the next thing you know we was in bed getting ready to do the horizontal mambo. She was kinda nervous, so I cracked a few jokes to relax her till she told me to shut up. I was nervous too, man. I was worried about maybe being queer, but besides even that, this was gonna be the first time for me since before I went to prison, and I was afraid I might be a little rusty. It was a night I think I'm always gonna remember. First time sex with a chick who's your girlfriend is always a big deal, especially if you're a guy. You get to see what she looks like naked, especially the boobs, and see what kind of funny noises she makes when she gets all excited. In spite of all my worrying, everything turned out okay. I guess sex is like being on a bicycle, you never forget how to ride. Still, it took Betty a long time to come that night, but that's probably cause she was busy with her own first time sex thoughts. Chicks are funny about that. It's like the first time you take him out to dinner. They don't care about the dinner so much as not looking bad eating it, which usually means not eating much of it at all. Same thing with sex. The first time, they don't care so much about coming as much as they don't want to embarrass themselves. Next time though you better deliver, that is if you want there to be a third time. So we are laying there afterwards, her head on my shoulder, and just talking real soft about nothing in particular, when all of a sudden there's this big commotion, and damn if Muscle Shoals wasn't trying to have sexual relations with Dottie. She didn't seem quite as interested as he was, but he stayed right on it, the two of them crashing into the walls in the bed and just going to town. I'll tell you, no one is gonna mistake old Muscle Shoals for a 60-minute man, but seeing it was his first time and all, maybe he'll improve with practice. A bit later I was the only one awake, and I was laying there listening to the three of them making their sleep noises, and wishing I could get my arm loose somehow, so I could get a glass of water without waking up Betty. but I just laid there listening to the sounds and smelling the odors of the people sech and dog sech and thinking about my life. Continued. Got 6 months in county jail for DUI. I had never been in jail before, so had no idea what it would be like. I was put in a 12-man cell, but was the 14th person in there. There was a mix of people in there, most were short timers, but some were waiting to be sent to prison for a long time. 2 were 25+ year guys. Well, on third night after lights out there, this huge thug that was one of the 2 that were going to prison decides he was feeling horny. Well, there was a little guy that was in there for a 3-day DUI sentence. Was his last night in there too. Poor fella. Well, this huge thug grabs him out of his bed and drags him over to the corner of the room where the 2 toilets and single shower was, and told him that the little guy was either going to suck his dick or he was going to kill him, and told the guy what does it matter to him, as he was going away for 25 years. What more could they do to him? Well, after being smacked a few times, the little guy decides to go ahead and do it. All the while I'm trying to act like him, asleep and unaware of everything, but in fact I've got tears running down my face and being scared shitless, hoping that I wouldn't be next. All the while hearing the noise from the blue job as I cried myself to sleep. Next day they released the little guy. Just about 4 hours later was all after the attack, and a few hours later the thug and his buddy got shipped off to prison. I talked to some of the other guys afterwards, and they all said that they were ready to help the little guy out if he would have had any backbone and fought back, but since he didn't care enough to fight over it, why should they? Lesson I learned was no matter what, stand up for yourself, as people that don't get far worse than they would have if they didn't. By the way, served 4 months of the 6-month sentence. Crack dealers and people in for viscous assaults were getting out in a month or 2, yet because I pled not guilty to a DUI somehow I deserved more time than them. Just love our justice system. Late 80s, Orange County Branch Jail, The Farm. Doing a couple weeks clearing up warrants and fines. One midnight there was a shakedown in Armont, which is one large room with some 30 bunk beds. Shakedown is where they search the whole place and take special pleasure in dumping all of your stuff on the floor. Everybody lines up outside while the shakedown goes on. Single file, no talking, and wearing only what you had on at midnight when they woke you up, which for most guys meant boxer shorts and maybe a t-shirt. Some veterans sleep in their jumpsuits for just this occasion. The black kid right in front of me looked 14, but he had to be 18 to be in county jail. He was maybe 5 feet tall, maybe 110 pounds, looked terrified of everything, freezing in his boxers, and he had a nervous twitch, along with Tourette's syndrome. His Tourette's wasn't super bad. He wasn't screaming cocksucker and motherfucker all of the time. He just made some barely audible clicking and grunting sounds and such. Until he drew the attention of the deputy. The deputy eventually noticed the twitching and came over and screamed in his face, "Stand faking still. Quit faking moving around." Which of course made both the twitch and his Tourette's worse, and now Deputy Dick can hear him and he's right back in his face screaming, "Shut the fuck up. I'm telling you to shut the fuck up. Bye." Now the kid is a blubbering mess, sobbing and staring at the ground, clicking and grunting up a storm, and twitching like crazy. I felt so bad for him. Keep in mind this was happening literally less than 3 feet in front of me. Does Deputy Dick show some compassion? Maybe run empathy? Eggs. No, Dick grabs the kid and throws him against a stucco wall. Then holding the kid by his shoulders he slams him, faking slams him, into the rough wall over and over, punctuating each syllable with a slam. Why? Slam won't. Slam you. Slam shut. Slam the. Slam fack. Slam up. Slam. Then he let the kid, now opening bawling, back into line in front of me. His scalp was bleeding, and I could see little pieces of yellow stucco embedded in there. I've never felt such contempt for another human being as I did for that deputy, and I cheerfully could have killed him. I sincerely hope someone else has by now. TLDR fact, the Orange County, California Sheriff's Office. I did some time in Mount Eden Prison, here in New Zealand. It is a really old prison and a pretty scary, imposing place. The inmates and guards call it the Rock. Looks like a castle with its stone bricks and guard towers. I would ask one of the guards for the newspaper and would get it after he was finished. I was first in line and was really excited to do the crossword. I was just about to get it when something happened, and there was a lockdown. We all got sent back to our cells. Just then, the guard's shift ended, and a new one came on. This new guy wasn't aware of the arrangement, so this guy whose cell was closer, who was screaming and yelling for the paper, got it before it. Now I hated having the paper after these fuckwits. Honestly, they just don't care. They put it all back in the wrong order. If they even bother to put it back, often it'll just be a pile of loose pieces. Total cunts, man. So inconsiderate. One of the craziest things that happened while I was in there was this skinhead named Lazak. Larry wrapped his new cellmate. He held a knife to his neck and threatened to kill him if he didn't comply or screamed. He damaged his colon so bad he needed a colostomy bag from then on. Poor bugger. I should mention that raps are actually rare in prison. They really don't happen like the movies. This guy was already a rapist and was a violent guy. This sheet is uncommon. For those interested, these were a few guys I was in with, and this guy, who I was sort of mates with while in there. I've actually got lots of stories about how the guys and the guards would fuck with the pedis in there. Quite funny. Also, there was one shaving razor for the whole unit. I had no idea Ori had HIV and we all had to share his razor. I can actually think of a time when he cut himself and was bleeding, and we all used the razor right after. He just gave it a rinse. Shocking, really. I've got tons of stories about faked up shit that had happened, added some more. TLDR at bottom point, I spent a total of 1 day in prison and about 2 in police lockup. The prison was a super maximum. One of I think only 2 or 3 in Canada. Penatang in case you're wondering. Anyways, the absolute worst thing about the whole experience was just the time to think how badly I faked up. I went into a panic mental state and just ran from home. Took all my shit thinking I'd just run, and I was armed with knives and some steel plated gloves. I was rather faked up. Depression had been gnawing away at me for more than a year. My mom had passed away and my life had no direction. But I would up at a police station. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but there I was, armed and suicidal. Cops came out and tased me. That shit hurts. Got tossed in the cell with nothing but my undies and was without anything but my freezing self for over 2 hours until I yelled and asked for my clothes back. I got a blanket, then again I asked for my clothes back, got my shirt this time. Now we are getting somewhere. During that time there was this drugged out native dude in the next cell. He was taken away after about 4 hours. Next a couple were brought in. Drug charges was what went down. The girl got a cavity search, and if I remember right they didn't find anything, but still suspected she had drugs up there. The boyfriend was with us for a good 6 or so hours, but he was released for whatever reason. Probably cause he didn't have the drugs. Now the last guy to be brought in was this big white dude. Mohawk, beard, and looked like motherfucking Zangief. And that's what I referred to him as to myself. Of course I called him by his real name when we talked. Super awesome guy. I wished we met in better circumstances, cause I would have loved to have been friends with this dude. Meeting with the magistrate at the courthouse, back to the cop shop. They decide they can't keep us overnight again. So it's off to Penatang, the oh so lovely Supermax. We spent like 9 hours just getting booked in. Spent out time in the holding cell with 2 gangbangers, a sketchy dude and a real quiet guy. Well, I'm with Zangief, so I'm not cheating myself that I might get beat up, or one of the dumbass would try anything. I'm a big dude myself, but not all muscle like my friend. All through booking I'm rather chummy with the guards. We are laughing and cracking jokes. I know by the time I leave and get into the cell block it'll be everyone's locked up, and I have Zangief, who since we came in together, sat together, got along with each other. They paired him with me as a cellmate. Cool. No spending the night with an idiot. OHH, and they moved us around in the back of a police sub the first time. We are 2 big guys and they've chained us by the wrists and a leg. Hilarity ensued trying to get us to fit back there. There's little room after they modify those things. We get into our cells. It's about 11 PM. We've just sat for hours on end with no sleep. Well, it took well over an hour to fall asleep. I was just thinking again how badly I faked up. There was nothing to distract me and keep these thoughts on the fringe again. That was one of the worst hours of my life. Laying on that damned cot thinking. Next day we are thrown in the paddy wagon and taken back to the courthouse for bail. Dad and older brother were there. Man, my heart was low. I got a $1,000 bail, and the charges were 2 counts assaulting a police officer, which I never did, 1 weapons, and 1 concealed weapons carry charge. Zangief was up after me, never saw him again. That bail hearing was the last I ever knew of the man, but I'd bet he may still live in the same town. I miss him. So man, that ride home was brutal with my dad. I figure he'd explode on me, like he did when I failed grade 8 math/science. By the way, honor student in high school, rocked that school. But he really didn't. Yeah, I still got a bit of a verbal ass kicking. But he realized I was pretty faked up in the head and all. Court date about 2 weeks later. I decide to take a plea bargain. All charges but concealed weapons carry dropped. They had rather solid evidence to nail me on the weapons charge, but didn't. They went lenient on me for being a first offender. I came out with an 18-month probation and a few stipulations, like find work or go to school. I've since went to school for a trade, had 2 jobs in it since. Now working at an unrelated job. Cause life is a beach and people are assholes. But the job I have is really good, nice pay and full benefits. Just made it past my probationary period and my actual probation ended about the same time technically. But the last meeting was in January. Sorry, I decided to story out most everything. But it feels good to get it out. TLDR, spent a day in prison, 2 in jail. Worst time to think. That solitude is just abhorrent to oneself. Pros. I met Canadian Zangief. Got to share the story of 2 of my friends in county, unrelated charges. From 6 years ago. Backstory #1. My one buddy Jay got faked over by his son's mother who overreported his wages, leaving him owing a lot of child support. When he went to court to prove how much he really made, they arrested him because of a bench warrant out of principle. He said he'd rather do the 6 months than pay her for lying. He ended up doing 4 at age 24. Backstory #2. A dorky kid 2 years younger than me and Jay, who we grew up with, comes from a pretty well-to-do family in town that everybody knows. He had a couple minor weed possession charges, always got probation or PTI. About 3 months into Jay's time, M's mom finds him in her room taking a necklace to sell for weed. His mom thought she could do a scared straight type deal to teach him a lesson, so she called the cops. Well, they weren't playing games and locked his ass up. M ended up in the same pod as Jay, and for the most part stayed in his cell all day reading Tolkien. After 9 days of self-imposed solitary, Jay convinced him to come out to the common area. It was after dinner. Everybody was just hanging out, playing cards and watching TV. Porn stars, I think. Well, M couldn't hear the TV cause every time he tried to move closer, someone would kick him out of the chair, so he finally went up the TV to raise the volume, but as he touched it, he knocked it off the stand and it broke. The whole pod went silent and everyone shot the worst luck to Jay, who did his best. I don't fucking know this dude. M just stood there and said, what? They'll just have to buy us a new TV. Co's rushed in first to prevent an almost riot on their hands, and second to clean up the TV, to keep it from being turned into weapons. Over the next day, M got beat in the shower, all his commissary stolen, as well as his sneakers. You could wear your own shoes, since laces, since it was the minimum security pod. M had to be put in lockdown for his own protection, then moved to PC a couple days later, after it became available. Edit. Derp spelling mistakes. TLDR, bratty kid I grew up with gets jammed up by his mom, breaks TV, gets beat. The worst part, in my opinion, I just got out after doing a county year, which is 8 months with good time, is seeing the change in yourself. I'm a good kid who got caught in a bad situation. I had to bite the bullet and do the time. I remember my first month I was up in this guy's cell. He arrived there a few days before me, doing 2 county years. We became pretty good friends by the end of it. We were talking about how we would never become like the rest of the individuals in there. People cook batches, a whole bunch of misrandom foods, mostly based on ramen noodles, all mixed together, cooked in the microwave and mixed in a trash bag before serving. People fight over petty things. I almost got in several fights, a few of which were over a bowl, yes, like a plastic cereal bowl, a chair, a card game, getting cut in the chow line, someone taking too much juice so you don't get any. Truly petty stuff that my girlfriend on the outside would laugh about, but it's serious in there. People saving food from any state meal, keeping it in their cell for hours before later eating it at room temperature. All of these things I thought were really bizarre when I first arrived. Along with people attitude in general, everyone is so hostile and almost on edge. I think being kept in a cage does that to the human soul. Anyways, I said I would never do these things. Next thing you know it, months down the road, thousands of push-ups and sit-ups later, doing all of the things I said I'd never do. Nothing too bad ever happened to me in there besides the humiliation of having to wash my clothes in my sink every Sunday. Thankfully I can say I left there with a few lessons learned and enough knowledge to not go back. While these stories at the top are funny, not horrible. How about when I dropped 135 pounds of weight on my thumb and shattered the bone into pieces? I didn't receive x-rays or medical attention for 6 days. My thumb, normally straight, was bent upwards. Oh, looks like you must have jammed it, says the prison nurse. How about every winter, when you're stuck in a dorm with 119 nasty stupid dregs of society start getting sick? Colds, flu, pneumonia, staph infections rampant. You couldn't keep yourself away from it because you're packed into a room with all these stinking men. How about the time after lunch when this guy walking past my bunk dropped his brownie on the ground? Hey, you just dropped your, wait, what the fuck, did you just shit your pants? Or the time the guy who was getting out of prison in 3 days beat the shit out of this guy who called him a beach. Not getting out now. Or how about when I got caught with 2 cigarettes and lost 30 days of my good time behavior? Wasn't as bad when 3 years later the state ordered the prison system to stop taking away so much good time behavior from the inmates. Now you lost 30 days for an assault. Much safer now. Me, of course, still had to serve that extra time. What about the time a college professor tried to sneak a handgun into the prison? Prison is a nice place if you like to sit on a toilet 2 feet away on both sides from other dudes. Need a hand? It's lovely stepping in a pile of cum in the showers. Or how the guy in the kitchen who has hepatitis C and is covered in sores. My favorite time in prison was during the summer. NOAC means the dorm stays 90 to 100 degrees all summer. At night it feels like you're in an oven. My favorite correctional officer was the black guy who liked to bust young white guys for smoking, but never would try to catch the black guys. Even after I had quit for 3 years I still got a write-up when he saw some guy standing next to me smoking. I'm sure the hearing board will believe me. I sure felt appreciated when this guy wrote me a note telling me he was in love with me, and though he didn't have much, he'd pay me as much I want to have sex with him. He didn't understand why I want into it. Probably because I've only been in prison 4 years, not decades like you. Was in a Iowa prison for weed. I ended up in a prison rehab. Part of my stint was a 6-month rehab program. My cellmate was a twice convicted domestic abuser whom called his ex something like 86 times from county jail. He was a control freak to say the least. This behavior pattern extended towards me. I wanted to do my time and get through the program with no trouble. What took place was me getting sick of his shit. We fought and I cracked my head on a bed and needed stitches. I didn't breath a word as to what happened. We had a third bed in our cell. A Hispanic fellow took the bunk. He was a fresh convert to Islam. He placed the Quran in the highest spot in the cell. We discussed the religion and conversed philosophy and so on. I'm huge on history and such. The domestic cellie would always badmouth the convert. Sensing an opportunity and knowing that a Muslim despises an unbeliever touching the Quran, I speculated that exposing the domestic guy's abuse towards me and the touching of the Quran would send the convert into a furry. However, before I could put my plan in motion, we were on a lockdown for 24 hours. The domestic guy started taking shit, and before I knew it the Hispanic jumped down and started beating him. I was so enraged at the treatment of the domestic guy, I too joined in whipping the guy's ass. The domestic guy yelled and yelled for guards that never came. The whole pod, something like 200 guys all yelling guard in unison. He was made fun of the rest of my time there. I still feel bad beating him up sometimes. I'm not a violent person. The guy was humbled that day, and I figure worse could happen to the guy. Did 9 in Virginia. Didn't happen to me. Happened outside my window, but saw a guy get cut in the face and upper body about whose turn it was to play basketball. He lived, but it took close to 500 stitches. to put his face back together. Then there was the time Charlie Slow, a hella good dude with issues from the steel plate in his forehead as an arm souvenir, caught a sparrow on the yard, bit its head off, and sucked the guts out. When Wildman bought the farm it was pretty fugue-sword. Got stabbed a couple of times in the chest just before lockdown. Doors to the hallway, and thus the dispensary, were already locked. Wildman was standing at the door trying to get help, saying I'm dying, and the guard was all flustered, and trying to open the door, and saying I'm hip. The evening that a lifer got some bad information from someone with a grudge against me was up there with both the best and the worst of times. For a good 45 minutes of discussion I was pretty sure I was gonna have to kill this guy or die trying. Eventually things got cleared up peacefully, and I talked him into going to school and working for his jed, even though he had a snowball in hell's chance of getting out. Prisoners practiced in America is a pretty faked up concept. I know I'm very late to the thread and nobody will really have a chance to read this. I think that's okay, because I know I'm typing this for myself. I was in prison for 6 years, 5 years and I was found not guilty. 2 years in I felt calm. I mostly kept to myself, although I had a few friends. One day I was given a new cellmate, and it was the worst experience in my life. To this day I can't sleep. I self-medicate any drug I can get my hands on. I have a girlfriend, God bless her, who I can't sleep next to, because if I do, I will go into shock when she touches me. Anyways, my new cellmate seemed fine. He told me he never been to prison before and was scared. I was just like him, so I think I wanted to make sure he felt okay. I stay in my cell to play cards with him. We talked. After a few days I truly started to bond with him. He became my friend. We both loved video games, came from the same town. Hell, I think we must have played the Would You Rather game for hours on end just laughing. Then, randomly I was asked by another prisoner about my cellmate. He wanted to know why he was locked up. I didn't even know, but it made me curious, so I asked him, and he confided in me that he raped a minor. I later found out that the person he raped was his wife who was underage. I was shocked and scarred of what would happen to him, so I tried my best to avoid the people asking me about him, until I was beaten and raped. The funny thing was I didn't mind it. I didn't even know why I was standing up for some random guy, but I knew that he wouldn't last long if people knew about his past. The rap went on for weeks. I shouldn't even call it rap. I would go meet the man, strip down, and he would do his thing. It became a scheduled thing. It was faked up. Eventually, it started being more than just one guy. It was a group. And it got worse, and I couldn't handle it. I broke and told them why my cellmate was behind bars. They gave me an option. Either I kill my cellmate or they kill both of us. I'm faked up. I didn't even think about killing him until one day he started talking. I don't even remember what he was saying. I just snapped. My hand grabbed a book I was reading. All I remember is the feeling of the hardcover and the letters of the book Pride and Prejudice. The feeling of the texture on my fingers. I can feel it now. I smashed his head in. The book needed up flying out of my hand, but without a beat I started using my hands. He was dead, but I didn't stop. Some part of me liked it. Everything pent up in me since forever. Arguments I lost, losing my job, my hunger. In my head I believed the more I smashed my fists into this bloody dead body, the more I would be happy. I kept going, laughing, punching, laughing, punching, until a guard came and pulled me off of him. I remember his face, his smell, his smile, the way he would shuffle the deck, the feeling of his blood on my hands, my friend. But even more, so I will never forget how good it felt, better than any drug, the rush of it all, the feeling of pure power. In all aspects I was his god, and I was passing judgment onto him. I was everything, and that scares me. It opened up a door that I believe should never be opened in a person. It keeps me up at night. It laughs at me when I'm awake. It mocks me when try to sleep. It's always watching me, waiting for the moment I unlock the door. When I was 17 I went to a juvenile camp in the Pacific Northwest that was in the middle of the woods with nothing around but trees. There were no fences and I guess administration thought we were more likely to die in the forest than actually reach civilization. Anyway, with it being in the woods we were taken on hikes often if we had free time, and it was a nice day. One of the part-time staff who ran the Native American group took us out to the fire pit, where they do smudging ceremonies. We were out there swapping stupid stories when he thought it would be fun to hike to the water tower that was up the hill a ways. He told us to go straight up the hill, and when you come out of the trees onto a service road, the water tower should be right around the corner, which it was, just not the direction we were going. So we overshot the tower and walked up the service road for about a mile. We ended up on a larger service road and sat up there for about a half hour. There were 4 of us, and we decided to walk back because the on-call staff did not show up. As we approached Camo, there was the water tower and also a truck from camp with flashing lights and about 5 officers standing around. We were faked. They brought us back and put us on lockdown for 2 weeks. We almost got sent to a maximum security facility point. It all worked out once it was understood by administration that it was a mistake. No one got extended sentences, escape charges. Those were seriously considered by the state, and those of us who were set to transfer to a community facility, including myself, got to go. TLDR got lost in the woods during a hike. Almost got escape charges. Nothing ended up happening. Can't believe I forgot this. Okay, so I was switched from one dorm to another, and apparently on the old dorm I was in, this older Mexican guy was giving blue jobs out for commissary, I think. Hopefully no the other way around lol. You would be surprised how the hardest most gangster dudes would start doing gay stuff. It was mostly all gang members where I was, and there were a lot of gang related stuff going on. Since I'm from Chicago, there was 3 lunch tables, one for neutrons, one for people, and one for folks. All the gangs fell under these 2 branches. They would say separate prayers at the table. My best friend in there was in charge of the prayer for the peoples. He was white and his gang was called the Gaylords. Sounds funny, but you would never talk shit about it to his face. First few days I was there, I was getting to know everyone, and I knew this neutron from the outside, and I made a joke that he was Gaylord, and the group around me was like whoa, and the actually Gaylord was like yo, I'm a Gaylord Joe. I was like oh shit. I pretended like I made the joke because he was white, and that's a mostly white gang, and I thought it didn't really exist anymore. But after that, me and the Gaylord actually became really good friends. I actually put money on his books when I left, even though he would never ask for it. There was money left on my house phone number that I was using to call my parents, and I told him he could call me anytime he wants to talk. He did a few times, and then called and asked if it was me who put money on his books, and I had to admit it. He was very thankful and never asked for more. Okay, this is first prison experience point. Leave from Marion County Jail to prison, taking us to Lake Butler Reception Center. Get there, take us in this big garage, and make us take all the jail clothes off, and put them in a bag. Now we're all but naked, lined up in rows of 2. There's inmates from other counties there also. They run us through a metal detector, and take us in this long hallway, where we stand shoulder to shoulder. The biggest redneckin, dip spittin' cracker I've ever seen in my fucking life, like 6 feet 8 350 pounds, looks at us and says, well, I can already tell I'm gonna have to smack the shit out of at least one of y'all today. And I'm praying in my head, fuck, I hope it's not me. So there's a long bench against the wall behind us. They tell us turn around and face the bench, put your knees against the bench, bend over at the waist, touch your forehead to the bench, and spread your ass cheeks. Oldest black dude next to me falls over into while this is happening. Co tell us everything is yes sir, no sir, makes us all scream it like 5 times. He says, if you don't hear something we say, do not say ha. So we make it through all this without anyone getting slapped. They give us boxes and a towel you have to drape around your neck and make us sit on these benches inside a room while they do everyone's tattoos and such, and they're running property and medical and stuff. Biggest cracker is doing people's property, and a guy at the property counter dealing with him makes the mistake of saying ha. Cracker grabs the towel around the dude's neck and yanks it down, slamming his chin into the counter, splits that sheet wide open. Blood was fucking everywhere. Also, he beat the living shit out of Tajits that were also coming in the group behind us. I used to know a carer criminal named Kenny. He was a really nice guy. He just couldn't stop himself from getting into some sort of crime because regular life bored him. He was serving a 7-year gig in medium security in Rhode Island when he was warned by the inmate in the next bed to not pay any attention to anything unusual and to just go right to sleep. This made sleep impossible, of course, so he lay awake, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The only sounds he heard for the first few hours were those of the guard, sitting at his desk at the end of the long row of beds, reading the newspaper, and drinking his coffee. The guard was brand new out of the academy, and although only on the job for a few weeks, all the inmates knew that he had a wife and a kid, whose pictures he always kept on his desk while working. Then Kenny heard the guy in the next bed slowly slide out and tiptoe across the floor. Then he heard what sounded like someone getting beat up, and the guard crying out in shock, and as the beating sounds continued, and the guard eventually went quiet. Then he heard the guy get back into bed just before another guard entered the room, and sent out an alarm. Then the lights came on and the entire room was being rousted out, naked, into the exercise yard. There they were forced to sit against the wall as bright lights blinded them. This all happened in January, so they were also being forced to sit naked in the snow as a strong 3 a.m. wind blew. They were brought into a room for questioning, one at a time, based on their bed number. Kenny was in bed number 4, so he only had to wait out there for 20 minutes or so, but he was still frozen half to death by the time they called him and they forced him into a chair in front of a desk where a state police captain sat. He told Kenny to give up the name of the murderer. Kenny knew it was the guy from bed number 5, but he wasn't about to snitch, so he just said, "I was asleep." Wrong answer. The cops standing on each side of the chair suddenly sent it over, forcing Kenny's head to hit the floor. He couldn't respond as his hands were cuffed from behind. The statey captain then bent down and grabbed Kenny's balls with all his might as one of the cops standing at his head grabbed him by the hair. They then, through long practice, I'm sure, managed to lift Kenny a good 5 feet above the floor, and just as Ken is suffering from being lifted by his hair and balls was about to make him pass out, they dropped him onto his back. Then a couple of cops dragged his suffering ass out of there as they called for the occupant of bed number 5, who quickly confessed. Went to county for a DUI. A kid got put in a one-man cell in the Loop for being 51 over 50. They knowingly put him in there with cleaning products that the workers used to clean the cells. He ate a bunch of the powdered bleach and died. Fast forward to my probation violations months later. They stopped cleaning the cells apparently as a result. The same sinks were broken and overflowing on both my visits since. Also got housed after a day in the Loop, and they put you with R3S and aggravated assault. Pretty much anyone who happens to be there gets thrown together regardless of the crime. It's something like a 60-80 man cell with 2 rows of metal bunks with 6 toilets, 3 for pissing which you must sit up as 1 for spitting toothpaste. Not that you got toothpaste until the next commissary, which could be a week, and a day room with a TV. You get in around 2 a.m. and there's a rep for the woods and a rep for the home is picking new guys like kids for dodgeball teams, and they tell you the rules and where to bunk up. Initiation time came, and I guess I didn't get a beating, but they wanted me to participate in one. Upon my refusal they got in my face and wanted to kick my ass. Thank God some other dude made a huge stink over it, got hit in the face, and they all went back to their bunks to avoid attention, and I was released the next morning. Nothing too crazy, but enough to make me never want to go back. This is not my story, but one I have heard from a new friend of mine. Back around 1998, my friend, let's call him A, was arrested for trafficking, refusing to testify against anyone. The judge gave him the maximum 10 years in the feds. I had just found out he had a son, A Jr., on the way before he went in. About 3 years into his sentence, AJR's mother dropped him off with her friend so she could go to a job interview. The mother's friend left A Jr. with her boyfriend and 4 other children. A Jr. had wet himself, and this threw the boyfriend into a rage. He punched the child until he was unconscious and wrapped him up in a blanket. Later he drove down the interstate to dump the body, which was found later by a passerby after a large-scale police search. The boyfriend was caught and charged. When I heard about this, he lost his will to live. He had plans to take out everybody working on his case at any chance he got. There was a particular inmate who kept following him around after all this happened. After repeated attempts to run him off, he finally decided to hear him out. This guy said he can help him, tell him his story, and show him he's still got more family that needs him. This inmate lost his entire family, 6 to 7 members, because they all rented a taxi van to go visit him in prison for the first time. He really turned him around at that point and he served his 10 years, and I met him about a year ago through friends. Sorry for the grammar spelling W/E. Oh, and that dude that helped him was serving 15 years, and when it was his time to go home nobody could find him anywhere. When they finally did, he punched a guard out and got to stay. Kinda Shawshank. Kid being gang raped. Was in a holding cell for the weekend. I'd been locked up cause I was causing shit and being a general douche. There were about 15 other guys in the cell, the majority of them members of the 28's gang. The cops then brought in this kid. Well, he was not underage, but you could see he was not a hardened criminal or anything. Anyways, that was the afternoon. The usual taunting and shit is going on. Chow times comes and goes. The nightly inspection round comes and goes. And then we are left to our own devices till the next AMS inspection. That's when the sheet started. This kid was called over and asked to and what he is in jail and just generally intimidated. Pretty quickly they started to smack him around and told him to get busy sucking and whatever. He was crying and shit, but nobody was going to help him. Next thing they started rapping him hard. At least 12 guys rapped him, more than once each, over the course of the night. He screamed a lot in the beginning. Then it just became painful moans, and later silence. They must have really damaged him. By the time the cops came around the next morning the kid was faked for life. I doubt he ever recovered from that. Felt really sorry for him. He was probably locked up for something stupid and just had the bad luck to be put into the same cell as hardened prison gangsters.